Okay, so this video is about comparing and ordering rational and irrational numbers. By the end of this lesson, your lesson objective is that I can locate, compare, and order rational and irrational numbers using a number line. So we learned what rational and irrational numbers were in the last video. We're going to take those and make meaning of them and figure out which one's the smallest, which one's the largest, and we're going to put them on a number line. Okay, so rational numbers. The first set we're going to do is just plain old rational numbers, numbers you've seen before. And we're going to take those rational numbers and we're going to put them on a number line. The way to do that is to first take every rational number and turn it into the same form. So you can't have square roots and fractions and decimals all together and try to put it onto the number line. You have to turn them all into decimals first. Once you turn them all into decimals, then you can place them correctly on the number line. So that's the first thing that we're going to do, is we're going to turn them all into decimals. Okay, so let's look up here. We have 3 and 9/10. That one's going to stay the same. Then we have -2 and 3/8. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the 3 divided by the 8, and we're going to get 2 and 375 thousandths. And we're going to round that up to the nearest tenth. So we're going to say -2 and 4/10. Then we look at 1 and 69 hundredths repeating. Since it's a repeating decimal, we know that it's going to be 1.69696969. We're going to make that simpler for us, and we're going to round it to the nearest tenth. So we're going to call that 1 and 7/10. Oops, sorry. Let's erase that. 1 and 7/10. And then we're going to look at this negative square root of 16. The first thing we're going to do is find the square root of 16. Well, 16 is a perfect square, so the square root of 16 is 4. Okay, and since the negative's in front of it, we're going to call that -4. So now we have all of our numbers in decimal form. Once we do that, we can actually put them on the number line. But I want you to remember, when you put them on the number line, you need to use the original form they were in order to notate them on the number line. So we're going to locate each one of them. So we have 3 and 9/10. We're going to go over to 3. We know that this is 3 1/2 right there. Let me erase that. And we're going to go a little farther and kind of estimate. And we're going to say that, and don't forget to label it, okay? That's 3 and 9/10. Okay? Then let's place -2 and 4/10. So we go to the negative side, 2 and 5. So we're going to go a little bit before that. Sorry, that's hard for me to write on the number line. And then that is, instead of -2 and 4/10, we're going to call that -2 and 3/8 because that was its original form. Okay, so we've got that one. Here's 1 and 7/10. +1 and 7/10. We're going to put it about right there. Oops, and so we're going to make that 1 and 69 hundredths repeating. And then our very last one is -4. So we're going over here, we're going to put a dot there. And remember, you're going to use the original form, so we're going to say negative square root of 16. Not real hard, you've placed things on the number line before, so now you can tell what's smallest and what's largest. So this is their order from least to greatest. The negative square root of 16, -2 and 3/8, 1 and 69 hundredths repeating, and 3 and 9/10. Putting them on the number line helps you to decide which one's the smallest and which one's the largest. Sometimes it's hard to make that connection until they're on the number line. So you can always draw yourself a number line if you don't have one to decide which one's the largest and which one's the smallest. So what happens when there are rational and irrational numbers? You're going to locate and order those numbers on the number line. All right, so here's the important part. Nothing changes. We're going to do the very same thing. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to find decimals for everything. So they're all in the same form. And then we're going to plot the numbers on the number line. And for our purposes, we really only have to go to the nearest tenth. So what we're going to do is we're going to turn all of these rational and irrational numbers into decimals, and we're going to round them to the nearest tenth. Then we're going to place them on the number line. So let's do that. I see 75 hundredths. I want to make that the nearest tenth. So I'm going to change that to 8/10. Okay. Now, square root of 12. When I put that in my calculator, I get a really long decimal. 3.46 something, 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 something. Okay? And so I'm going to round that to the nearest tenth, and I get 3 5/10. Then, putting the fraction into a decimal is easy. We've done that before. Take the top number, divide it by the bottom number, and when I get that, I get 5/10. Negative 1 8/10 is just the same. It doesn't change. And then I'm going to do the square root of 4, or the negative square root of 4, sorry. Negative square root of 4, which is negative 2, because the square root of 4 is a perfect square. So we're going to have negative 2. Now let's place those on the number line. So 8/10 is about right here. And remember, we're going to put the original form. So 75/100 was the original form. Okay? So let's do the square root of 12. That's 3 5/10. So let's write that there. So the square root of 12. Okay, now 4/8 is 5/10. Now, if you don't have enough room to label above the number line, can you label underneath the number line? Yes, I'm not going to do that because I don't have a lot of room. So I'm going to number it above. So 5/10. Oops, look what I forgot to do. Put it in its original form. So we're going to call that 4/8. Sorry about that. Then we're going to do negative 1 8/10. So go over to the negative side and plot that. And that was originally negative 1 8/10. And then we have the negative square root of 4, which was negative 2. So we're going to plot that. Those are going to be really close together. And call that negative square root of 4. Pretty simple, couple of steps. Make sure that you make those steps first and then put them on the number line. Now we know what they are from least to greatest. They go the negative square root of 4 is the smallest, then negative 1 8/10, 4/8, 75/100, and the square root of 12. That's in order from least to greatest. All right, so this is the very last one. I want you to try it on your own and then come back and see how you did. All right, so the first thing we need to do is turn everything into a decimal. 2 pi, that means 2 times 3.14, and we get 6 28/100. And when we do that, we're going to round it to the nearest tenth. So we're going to call that 6 3/10. Then 8 divided by 15 is 53/100, or 5/10 is rounded to the nearest tenth. And then 2 times the square root of 3, remember, square root of 3 first. Okay, times 2, which is 3 46/100, which we're going to round to 3 5/10. And then we have 4 1/10. Now let's place those on the number line. Okay, 6 3/10 is somewhere around there. And remember, that was 2 pi. That's how I want to put it on my number line. And then 8/15 is close to half, or 5/10. So we're going to call that 8 over 15. Okay, don't forget to put a dot and then label it. And so then we have 2 times the square root of 3, which is 3 5/10. And then we have 4 1/10. So we know that in order from least to greatest, 8/15 is the smallest, 2 times the square root of 3 is next, 4 1/10 is the following, and the greatest is 2 times pi.